I'd like to call this meeting to order, and at this time I'd like to give the opening to Councillor Jake Siemens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things I've always appreciated about Steinbach is our tree canopy, all the different things. So I will, about trees in Steinbach, so I will point you to the screen where I would like to show you some of my favorite trees in Steinbach. So this is the Anna Barkman tree, planted by Anna Barkman, approximately 1905, and it just so happens I live across the street from her granddaughter, so I hear about Anna Barkman. Anna Barkman had a large orchard that she made her children and grandchildren pick the fruits from, and also she had a vegetable garden. Anna Barkman was also very involved in our community as she canned and put a lot of the fruit and the vegetables from her large gardens into preserves, which fed the local hospital. In those days, the Steinbach Hospital, the families had to feed the patients. It wasn't the hospital's responsibility. This particular tree is the last remnant of that orchard. At one point, it had 3 different kinds of crab apples grafted onto that tree. And today, it only blooms one color. But I do remember back in the early 80s where 3 different weeks, it would bloom 3 different colors. And so that is one of my favorite trees. It's also a heritage tree of Steinbach. This is the largest cottonwood tree in Steinbach. It's just across the street from the Civic Center. Cottonwood trees grow to be 80 to 100 years old. This is one of the oldest in Steinbach. And I would say this one is around 80 years old. And that used to be a boulevard tree. There used to be 4 or 5 along that stretch when that was the official Reimer Avenue. This is Elm Street, one of my favorite streets in Steinbach. This is had a lot of large elms in it. You can see that the 2 elms on the left are destined to be removed this summer yet because they both have markings on them. You can see the Dutch elm beetle has done its work, and those trees are starting to die off. But this is what trees, having trees as shelter belts and boulevard trees in our community look like. It's Hanover used to look like this. Hanover no longer looks like that either. We've a lot of the elm trees that lined our boulevards. These boulevard trees were put in the late 1940s when the town of Steinbach, or village of Steinbach at that time, put in a lot of boulevard plantings, and they were all elm trees, the stately American elm tree. So they are a gorgeous tree, but slowly they are reaching the end of their lifespan. This is an elm tree. This is my favorite elm tree in Steinbach. It's in K.R. Barkman Park. It was planted in the late 1940s when the K.R. Barkman Park was built. That is when it was in the late 1940s that the water wells were drilled, and the whole K.R. Barkman Park was made at that time when the wells went in, just to preserve that area so that you couldn't have any construction too close by. So they actually developed that into a park. Many of the original trees in that park were either brought in from the Sandylands Provincial Forest, and in this case, some of the leftover elms from the boulevard plantings were also planted in that park. This is my favorite oak tree in Steinbach. It's roughly 250 years old. It's a Eugene Dirksen tree, and not that he planted it, but he built the house in behind that tree, and that tree covers that whole yard. It's a tremendous tree. It's a stately bur oak that used to have, it doesn't anymore, but it used to have a tire swing hanging from one of the low-lying branches. And Steinbach has a couple areas where there are oak tree placements in Steinbach, but this tree has always been a magnificent tree. This is my favorite tree in all of Steinbach. Joe Penner tree on 3rd Street. It was planted around 1960 by Joe Penner, who built the house and planted that in his front yard. This tree as well is a basswood. This is the same style of tree that we have down the center of our main street. It covers the whole front yard. It is a gorgeous tree. The lifespan of a basswood also is around 80 years, so this this will be approaching 60 years old, this tree, but it is a gorgeous tree, and it turns bright orange and yellows in fall. This is a Manchurian ash. This is what we planted a lot of trees, ash trees in Steinbach over the years. And like many communities in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, the ash tree replaced the elm tree. Because of its crown and its shape, which is natural on those trees, you can see why it's a good boulevard tree, and it's a beautiful shade tree. And that tree there is about 15 years old. That's across the street from our place. And the other good thing about this style of a tree on the front yard is that the root ball doesn't go down and get into the sewer lines, and so it doesn't have those kind of characteristics. But now with the emerald ash borer, we don't plant this tree as much anymore. But this is this style of an ash tree that is on our main street and on each side of our main street, with the basswoods along the middle. These are the Pankratz trees, I call them. Back in the early 80s, Helmut Pankratz was the mayor at that time, and they formed a beautification committee to begin work on redesigning Main Street in Steinbach. And the beautification committee was set aside to do a couple of things. One of them was to review our tree canopy. Another one was to take a good look at how to beautify Main Street as in conjunction with construction of Main Street. So that committee did a lot of different work. They did a lot of daydreaming, and the Parks and Rec Department were the workhorses at that time. So one of the interesting things was that the mayor of the day had planted a shelter belt of evergreen trees that he got from somewhere, and the challenge from the deputy mayor and members of the beautification committee that he should start the tree planting program in Steinbach, as he should donate those trees. So those 2 trees were donated off his shelter belt by Mayor Helmut Pankratz at the time. And they were about 5 feet tall when we planted them, but there was no trees on that front yard, or flowers, that is, prior to that time. This is a pear tree that is in our K.R. Barkman Park. The pear tree, well, came off of Beaver Crescent, and so what we did in the day, there was a nursery in Steinbach where the individual owned a large tree spade that would take up to 48-inch root ball of tree spade. So as the cities bought property in various places, or there was going to be construction, all the trees were going to be knocked down, I had them on a short list of phone calls, and so I would then go take those trees and move them into various parks. This one comes off of Beaver Crescent. It was a water main break, and this tree was planted on town property, on city property, and it had to be moved for water main break. So the waterworks superintendent called me, and 20 minutes later, the Urban Clausen, who owned the tree spade, he was on his way, and he took this, and he by noon, it was in our park, and we would have different locations. So there are 5 or 6 of these style of trees, different trees. But that is a pear tree. It's not often you're going to find a pear tree that survives that well in Manitoba. One of the reasons that survives is K.R. Barkman Park has a sprinkler system that was installed in the 1950s. And to water the front flower bed, the sprinkler system was right on that edge. So that tree was on the edge of the sprinkler system. As we watered flowers, we always watered that tree as well. So it had plenty of water. This is another setting of oak trees in our Pioneer Cemetery. The Pioneer Cemetery, when it was developed, was just outside of the village of Steinbach. And these are oaks. These oaks were 100 years old when Steinbach was settled in 1874. We measured them. The reason I know that is because we had the University of Manitoba do a report on our tree canopy back in the 1990s. And they measured various trees. They measured these as well as the Eugene Dirksen trees, and gave us an approximate age of those trees. So there are some of the early pictures of this cemetery, people being buried in the cemetery, and these trees are large at that time already, but behind the cemetery was prairie, and so there was no trees in behind the cemetery. It was all cultivated land. And so, but one of the interesting reasons that there is oak trees in cemeteries is because these American bur oak, their taproot is almost as deep as it is tall. And they're very difficult to remove, and oak trees live up to 800 years old. And so often in the early days, they didn't have the tools to remove the oak trees and to then cultivate the land. So often they ended up being places where cemeteries, which makes sense, they're stately oaks and long-lasting, as well as often you'll find oaks in pasture land, simply because they couldn't cultivate that land. This is another good story of Steinbach and what we continue. This is Southwood Crescent. There was a gentleman by the name of Peter Dick who built a house here in the mid-1970s, and he approached the town council together with his neighbors, and they said, if you, as a community, buy the tree, we'll plant it and we'll take care of it. So these are the trees that were planted roughly in 1975, and this is the result. And one of the great things, I think, is that this program still exists almost 50 years later, 45 years later. This tree planting program still exists, where the city buys a tree and the homeowners then take care of it. But this is a beautiful boulevard tree setting. It's all ash trees, so we would be planting something different these days. But it is started by an engineer who worked for Manitoba Highways by the name of Peter Dick, and he was also city councillor for one term at one point. Is that it? Well, Mr. Mayor, those were some of my favorite trees in Steinbach. I haven't told you about the Dowie tree or the Schrader tree or some of the others that I've named, and those are only names that I have for the trees, simply so I can identify them. And they're only names that I call them, nobody else. And the fact is that we focused on the health of our tree canopy. I like it that we've hired an arborist who takes a great interest in our trees and so on, and that we continue to work at planting trees in new neighborhoods, replacing our tree programs, and also within our parks and our boulevard, in our boulevards. Like people, trees also have a lifespan, so we need to keep replacing them with different varieties, keep our community healthy, and at times of heat, like we currently have, it sure helps with keeping our homes cooler if you have a great big elm tree hanging over your house. It makes a big difference. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Siemens. You know, trees are important to us too, and we usually plant a couple of trees on every property that we own, which with the amount of times we've moved, it's quite a few properties. So we've planted a few trees too. Maybe one day, one of those trees will be your favorite.
We call it the Mayor Funk Tree.
Okay. Council, we have the agenda in front of us. I'm looking for a motion to adopt. Councillor Swagstra, second by Councillor Hebert. Any comments?
Nope.
Okay, we'll call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. We have the minutes of July 2021, the regular council meeting in front of us. It starts on page 1. We've all had a chance to review. Council looking for a motion to approve. Councillor Hebert, second by Councillor Siemens. Any comments? Okay, call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Susan Penner is on holidays this week. Looking for a motion to excuse. Councillor Swagstra, second by Councillor Siemens. Any comments? We'll call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. We have no public hearings, and it is just a little bit before 7:45, so we'll go to number 9, administration, accounts payable. The accounts payable on the back of the book. Looking for a motion to approve. Councillor Hebert, second by Councillor Penner. Any comments?
No comments.
Call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Okay, it is 7:45. We do have a delegation scheduled, but I'll just ask administration if the delegation has showed up. Okay. On council, the delegation, Katie Ducharme, had called earlier today and said that she was having conflicting scheduling problems, and so I guess she just couldn't make it. Okay, then we will go to 9B. This is a bylaw 2181, Bush Farm Road widening and Park Hill Public Reserve. We're going to do first and second reading today. It's on page 3. Mr. Workington, could you please introduce this file?
Mr. Mayor, this bylaw is being presented for consideration for first and second reading by council. The bylaw includes a portion of the land that's identified on the schedule on page 7 as a road widening, which is approximately 50 feet wide. And then the balance of the public lands being a public reserve to also be included in the bylaw. And it is in relation to a plan development by Sinceris GP Ltd. That is developing the Park Hill neighborhood. This is something that will need 3 readings, and at this point, administration is recommending that bylaw 2181 be given first and second reading for the road widening public reserve creation along Bush Farm Road in Steinbach.
Thank you, Mr. Workington. Council, how would you like to proceed? Councillor Swykstra?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make the motion for first reading.
Seconder, Councillor Siemens, go ahead. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the city manager noted, this is a widening of Bush Farm Road, and then also along Bush Farm Road, the creation of a public reserve. And this is specifically because of the Park Hill development and ensuring that there is drainage there. And so widening Bush Farm Road allows for the installation of major utilities along the right-of-way. And then, of course, the public reserve, creating that, allows for the construction of stormwater storage ponds for the Park Hill residential development. And so, again, this is a part of planning to make sure that, that as neighborhoods develop, that we have the infrastructure in place for that to be able to go ahead.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Siemens? Anything further of council? Anything in closing?
No.
Okay, council, we'll call for the question for first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. The council will go directly into second reading. Looking for a motion to approve. Councillor Hebert, second by Councillor Hebert. Go ahead, Councillor.
No further comments.
Anything further?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further of council? Nothing in closing?
No.
Okay, call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We'll move to 9C. This is bylaw 2182. This is rezoning 115 First Street, first reading. Mr. Worthing, could you please introduce this file?
Mr. Mayor, this is an application for rezoning for a property located at 115 First Street in Steinbach. The owner of the property is Tina and Cornelius Workington, with the applicant for the rezoning being Kingdom Home Building, Inc. This bylaw is being presented for first reading. It does propose to rezone the subject property from RLD residential low density to RMD residential medium density, as the developer is intending to create a multifamily development on the site and to join it with a previously rezoned property next door at 107 First Street. Recommendation is for council to give this first reading so that a public hearing could be scheduled for later on in September.
Thank you, Mr. Workington. Council, would you like to proceed? Councillor Siemens,
Motion to approve.
second by Councillor Penner. Go ahead, Councillor.
Question to administration through you, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
When does a traffic study is required when we do rezoning for multifamily?
There isn't a specific trigger or set of conditions that necessarily requires a traffic impact study. Generally, there is a comment within the city's official community plan that if there is a proposed development that is within a certain distance of a provincial trunk highway and traffic patterns may be impacted, the city may request it. But in this case, it is not anticipated that such a study would be required for this proposal.
I think, Mr. Mayor, first off, I think it's important that we approve this, that it will go to a public hearing on so that we can hear what the neighborhood has to say about this, as well as I do think that potentially we need to take a look at a traffic impact study. We've got a lot of new RMD that has gone up on First Street. Has an effect on both ends of it at Highway 52 as well as Highway 12. And there have been complaints in the past from the neighborhood regarding traffic. But at this point, I think it would be prudent for us to approve first reading so that we can move into second reading and hear what the public has to say.
Thank you. Anything further?
Nothing further.
Anything further of council? Anything in closing?
No, sir.
Yes, council, I do believe that it's best that we do approve this first reading so that it can go to a public hearing. But I would caution council too, because this area is getting reasonably saturated with RMD. I think we should be looking at the impact to the traffic at this point, because it seems to be getting more congested with every bill that comes there. And I think in the future, we could probably count on having more builds in this area, because it is an area that is being renewed, and it seems to be a prime area for people to be building nice deep lots, nice wide lots. It's very, very attractive for multifamily. So call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, 9D, Manitoba Hydro. This is PTH 12 North, the street lighting. Mr. Worthing, could you please introduce this file?
Mr. Mayor, this is a more of an administrative matter as part of an ongoing authorization process. Whenever additional streetlights are installed in public areas in Steinbach, a resolution of council is required. And this particular application proposes to install a set of 12 streetlights on PTH 12 North in Steinbach at the north end of the city.
Okay. Council, how would you like to proceed?
Motion to approve.
Okay, do we have seconder? Second by Councillor Schweitzer. Go ahead, Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, looking at this is a higher wattage bulb than we usually approve. This is not on the city streets, this is on the highway. And so therefore the cost obviously per light is going to be more. I think I figured out the cost of light here is about $281, and I think the usual lights on our streets are around $160. So that's why the increase in cost. So it's going to cost us $281 a year to run these lights. But again, I say they're high voltage, they're needed on the highway, and therefore we need to go ahead.
Thank you. Anything further?
Nope.
Anything further of council? Anything in closing?
Nothing further.
Okay, call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Hey, council, are there any questions of council? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to correspondence petitions. 11A, this is the Minister of Central Services. This is referring to the ISEP project approval. The Southeast Event Center project. It gives more detail exactly what has been approved. And council, how would you like to proceed? Take this as information? Okay.
Very good information.
Yes. Probably some of the best information we got this year. Okay, there's no other business. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Hebert, second by Councillor Siemens. Call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Okay, the next regular council meeting is Tuesday, August 17th, 2021 at 7:30. Thank you.